Ladies and gentlemen, the PlayStation 5 Pro is in development according to a report that has been floating around the internet. Now this info actually closely matches info that I've already put out myself across a couple of videos. So in this video then, I wanted to discuss these leaks, my older information and do a comparison, as well as discuss performance targets that I'd previously heard, and how this may pertain to the PlayStation 6, because there's a lot of stuff to go through here, and of course we're going to get into all of this after this message from the video's sponsor. If you're running a copy of Windows 10 which isn't activated, of course, not only do you have to worry about the missing customization options, but there's also that annoying Windows desktop watermark reminding you to activate. Today's video is sponsored by WhoKeys.com, and they have an excellent price on Windows 10 Professional as well as home keys. Yeah, and they also of course sell games. I've bought a few Windows 10 keys with my own personal account to test everything was legit and worked in preparation for this sponsored video. You can pick up one of their keys for 25% off using the coupon code RGT in the checkout. There's links to their website in the video description. Also, if you're building a few systems, there's bundles available too. Again, you can check out WhoKeys.com and use the coupon code RGT for 25% off the listed Windows 10 key prices. So firstly, I'd like to give credit to InsiderGaming.com, and essentially they have had a pretty good track record. Tom Henderson had previously leaked that there would be a PS5 with a detachable disk drive. It's kind of like a slimline model. Just for those wondering, according to what I've been hearing as well, this is true, but you cannot use the detachable drive, purchase that separately and then use it on one of the launch PS5s. So for example, if you bought the diskless PS5 at launch, you will not be able to use this detachable drive on it, at least according to what I've been hearing. But moving on to this particular story, Insider Gaming's Tom Henderson states that there is actually a PS5 Pro which is in development, and it will actually launch late 2024. Now, he does not have information regarding the performance targets. However, much like I've mentioned several times, they are talking about the patent which has been filed by Mark Cerny. Now, this patent basically accelerates ray tracing performance in video games, and it does so in numerous ways. I just said razor, well done me. But basically this patent is a lot more efficient in how ray tracing is handled across the GPU, and it is almost certainly utilizing a later version of the RDNA IP. I think it's probably RDNA 3. It kind of reads like that based on the patent. However, a patent is a patent, and it doesn't necessarily portray all of the features of the GPU. What is important though is that this patent is not something that will work on the base PS5. It just will not work. RDNA 2 does not have these capabilities on desktop, Xbox, PlayStation. It just doesn't work. Second point is it is not PS6, because one, they would not publish a patent this early. Like the PS6 is rumored to be launching in like late 27, 28. And yeah, the capabilities wouldn't be advanced enough for the PS6. Almost certainly it would be a much later RDNA IP. So it would be a RDNA 4 or RDNA 5 at that point. Now, I've had numerous people asking my opinion of this particular story, because as I said, a lot of folks know that I've already reported that the PS5 Pro is potentially happening. In fact, I've had numerous videos. My personal information, what I'd heard as the targets for the PS5 Pro was something along the lines of 2 times increase in general performance. Now, I'm uncertain if that is FP32 or T-flops if you prefer, or whether that's raster performance. The two do not necessarily correlate. The second is I'd heard around 2.5 times increase in ray tracing performance. And there were a couple of other aspects to this as well. One, the PS5 Pro was primarily being developed for PSVR 2. Now, of course, the base PS5 is handling VR really well, and I think it's fair to say that PSVR 2 is actually doing very well. Like, critics are receiving it excellently. It is incredibly impressive for the price point, and honestly, if you are someone who wants to experience VR on a budget, and I say this somewhat begrudgingly as a PC gamer, the PlayStation is kind of spanking PC here, because the hardware itself to run VR convincingly on PC, well, let's just say it can't be done at the kind of price point of a PS5 and a PSVR 2. them's just the facts. That's just the reality of the situation. But of course, there is always room for improvement. And what I've basically been told is that the PS5 Pro would allow things like better ray tracing in virtual reality, so multi-bounce RT. If you don't know what that is, basically ray tracing, of course, is the method of simulating light by essentially bouncing rays into a scene. So what it does is it uses the camera position to send out rays, and then the more bounces, in other words, the more objects rays go pew from, so the more basically things the rays will hit in a scene, the more accurate that ray tracing can be. Because obviously light in real world, well, it can hit multiple objects. So obviously if it's only hitting 2 objects rather than say 3 or 4, you're losing potential detail. So that's one way that I've heard it was better. Increasing frame rate, resolution. Don't forget certain games are hitting only 1080p, admittedly being upscaled. Games like Returnal, we've seen a lot of other games as well. So there are a lot of different ways the PS5 Pro could benefit users. However, I have also been told that the PS5 Pro is kind of expensive. Now, prices are very difficult to predict this far out, and well, things can happen. Sony could choose to take a small loss per console, or it could choose to take a profit, or it could choose to break even. Things such as global supply chains, a crap ton of different things can alter the price of the console, but I'd heard at least $599 was a price point that was being considered, and all the way up to $699. And this leads me to one of the problems that seems to be floating around. Basically, I am uncertain whether the PS5 Pro is still a thing. I've heard from I've heard mixed things. Some of my sources are very confident it's dead. In fact, one of the sources that gave me the actual information in the first place, I actually had a couple of sources that told me about the PS5 Pro, and one of them that actually gave me some of the information is now one of the ones who are telling me it's dead, Jim. And there are a number of reasons that this potentially is happening. One, the price point, and Sony obviously know that it's not going to appeal to as many customers. Of course, there are people who will buy the latest iPhone or RTX 4090s or whatever, and obviously you will still get a market for that. However, with all of the stuff that's happening in the world right now, that is something that obviously is, well, Sony is cognizant of. Plus, also, it's additional workload for the customers. Plus, it's also additional work for developers. Obviously, having more versions to cater for means developers have to do more work. And you also have other things like Sony needing to market the console. Plus, let's face it, the PS5 still hasn't really been fully tapped out, and it's the same as the Xbox. With all of the stuff that's happened in the world right now, I think it's fair to say that the PS4 is finally starting to die. But what? It's been 3 years now. Spider-Man, of course, Spider-Man 2, should I say, that's going to be PS5 only, but a number of games have still been available on the PS4. Admittedly, you're getting a dialed-back version. You don't get like the super fast load times, you don't get ray tracing, it doesn't massage your shoulders and whispers in your ear that it loves you, but hey, at least you can play it. So, I don't know. The PS5 Pro, existing, I am honestly 50-50 on this, guys. Like, I'm convinced at one point or another it was being developed. There are patents which literally show that Sony were working on this thing. In fact, to add to this, there was, and I've discussed this several times as well on the channel, there was even a, I don't know what you'd call it, I guess kind of like an internal lecture, like a demo of Sony. The words escape me right now because my brain is way too caffeinated and also not caffeinated enough to kind of like work optimally. You know what it's like when you're in that weird zone. But basically there was kind of like a showcase that Sony were putting together showing things like ray tracing, and although it was talking primarily about films, you can clearly also see that PlayStation was listed, and there were a number of technologies that were discussing, but basically what this was doing, with something like FSR or upscaling, what it does when you're talking about like lower resolution upscaling to a higher resolution, what it basically does is it does pixel interpolation. So essentially it's kind of filling in the blank pixels. I'm vastly simplifying this. And something like FSR2, for example, will use previous frames of animation, basically temporal data to upscale to a higher resolution. And we've seen this with great success with like DLSS2, for example. And there are other solutions as well, like checkerboard rendering. But basically speaking, what it does is it takes a lower resolution, let's say 1440p, and upscales it to 4K. What Sony were talking about with the ray tracing, however, was a little bit different. And the more rays you basically can use in a scene, the higher the quality of the image. So what Sony's, what Sony's conference basically was going through is instead using fewer numbers of rays and then using machine learning tools to basically get a higher quality image. And it looked really cool. It looked very impressive. Now, whether or not this can run on the PS5 base model, I honestly couldn't tell you 100%. However, I am skeptical that it was for the PS5 base model. So I think it was either for the PS5 Pro or the PS6. I do not know that for 100%, so if I'm wrong, well, yeah, I'll just take the L, but I don't think it was for the PS5. So yeah, guys, I honestly do not know whether the PS5 Pro is still in development. Tom Henderson does have pretty good sources. However, this could be a case where the PS5 Pro was being considered and then is dead, or a new model is being also in development. Don't forget, we've seen the Switch Pro cancelled and then happening again, cancelled, then happening and now cancelled, and now they're moving on to an entirely new variant. So it's possible that the version that I knew about with the PS5 Pro is dead and Sony have changed these specifications or done something else, and that's why this mix-up is happening. I'm not calling out Tom here. Again, he has pretty good sources, but I have to say that I have reported this previously, and now some of my sources are telling me it is still on, whereas others are telling me it's dead. And that's not me fence-sitting, that's just me being honest. I genuinely do not know what's going on. My advice to you is this thing is not going to launch until late 2024. So it's like, if you want to pick up a PS5, now's the time. I mean, personally, I wouldn't want to wait on getting something like Spider-Man. Obviously, if you're happy to wait for whatever reason. I'm sure the inevitable question is, what about Microsoft? I've also heard the same thing. Microsoft, I know they were working on a mid-generation refresh, but I also think it's possible that they're just waiting things out as well for the next generation. It's going to be very interesting what the next generation consoles are actually capable of from both Microsoft and Sony. There's a lot of very interesting technology which is starting to merge together. And AI is a very easy one to point to. With Linux, AMD have acquired them, and they can do a lot of stuff with, well, basically AI, AI acceleration, that type of stuff. But, we're starting to really come together with a lot of very interesting technology, with caches on the GPU, MCD stuff that, of course, RDNA 3 has been really pushing. We're starting to get a lot more capability in terms of packaging. I don't think the PS6 is going to be like just a monolithic die in kind of the same way the PS5 or Xbox Series X is. I think we're going to see a lot more interesting stuff. I don't think the PS6 is going to just be like same thing, but more of it. I don't think that's the way Sony or Microsoft are going to be going. I've already talked a couple of reports about Microsoft and Windows 12, and it's going to have basically, you can almost consider it like ChatGPT baked in. And I think that advanced artificial intelligence, AMD have already stated that they're looking to accelerate games with AI. I think there's going to be a lot of cool stuff. Anyway, this video is becoming a lot more rambly than what I'd like it to have been. I've reached out to numerous sources at this point, so I'm waiting to hear back to hear what they say about this stuff. I will be letting you guys know if there's an update. Just a small thing from me to you. Tomorrow I am taking off. It is Wednesday. Tomorrow, that is, not the day you're listening to this. It could be a Thursday. I don't know. But tomorrow I'm taking off as it's March the 15th, which is my birthday. It's a kind of a weird day for me because my dad passed away on that day on my birthday. So I want to just take it off. It's kind of like a day where I, celebrate with one or two people, but I kind of just like to think about what's happened over the last year. On Patreon right now, I believe it's live, there's also a post where you can submit questions. Matt Hargett, also known as Psych on Twitter, and I are going to be recording a podcast. It's not going to be live. I think that's being recorded on Thursday. I've got the date somewhere. So we're going to record that, and we're going to be discussing a bunch of stuff. Obviously, any questions which are submitted, they cannot discuss anything. He cannot, excuse me, discuss anything regarding Sony NDA stuff, but we're going to be talking about a lot of cool stuff like porting across different platforms. We're going to be talking about maybe Nintendo's new console, a bunch of other stuff, so should be really fun. I'm really looking forward to speaking to Matt. It's going to be quite an experience. We actually tried to get a couple of other guests on, but just time at the moment is just kind of weird, and yeah, it's just, hopefully we can get another guest on soon, but it's just us two for this one. With that said, thanks to everyone who has been supportive and watching the content. Hope you guys are having an amazing day. Stay safe. Love you all. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.